Welcome to Squat Talks 6. Tonight we're going to talk about low back pain and squatting and pain in general. Before we do that, I'll tell you a little bit about the workout that I had today. This is a circuit, a 7-minute circuit. I start out with 30 seconds of squatting with 255. Follow that up with 30 seconds rest. Then I go into Bulgarian split squats with body weight 10 and 10 in 2 minutes. And then I do 10 body weight Cossack squats in a minute. And then I finish up that circuit with one arm deadlifts with a 3-inch handle with 50 pounds, 10 and 10 in a minute. And then I do 2 minutes rest, and then I repeat that circuit 4 times through. So kind of a nice little circuit. The squats are of course the hardest thing. The Bulgarian split squats and the Cossack squats certainly hit the legs and challenge mobility, but they're not terribly difficult. It's more of a mobility challenge than anything. But they do help me feel better on squats, so I include them. And the one-arm deadlifts are a grip intensive exercise. I enjoy grip work. I'm not particularly good at it, but I do try to include it in my training on a regular basis because I enjoy it, and just because I enjoy it more than anything else. I just try to include grip workouts when I can. I do have some modest goals for the year that I'll try to hit with one-arm deadlifts using different kinds of grip implements, including the hub and 3-inch, like a rolling thunder type of thing, and then also a vertical bar, which is just basically a bar that you lift straight up. So those are things that I'll try to include in my training on a regular basis as well, just for grip. And so that's the workout. I'll do that 4 times through, so it'll take about 28 minutes. And pretty good workout. You might notice the hairs in the video a little bit different. It was homecoming at our school today, so I decided to have kind of a wacky haircut for homecoming. That circle beard went away though soon after this workout was completed. So tonight we're talking about low back pain. Low back pain is something I've had issues with occasionally throughout my time squatting since I was a teenager through my 30s. I had back pain off and on. It started when I was probably 19. I was trying to hit really deep squats, and my father was an Olympic weightlifter, so I was actually born in York, Pennsylvania. So when I grew up, I was surrounded by people who did squats, and squatting deep was kind of a matter of pride. And then, of course, you read the bodybuilding magazines of the 80s, and they all talked about squatting as deeply as you possibly could. So I was actively trying to squat deep, and I would allow that lower back to round because it helps you squat deeply. If you aren't worried about your posture as much, you can squat more deeply, and the lower back rounded, came up with kind of a heavier squat, and of course I tweaked my back pretty badly, and that was kind of the start of occasional issues with the low back that I hadn't really experienced prior to that, but I had to be careful with, for example, heavy leg presses and things like that at the time that I was doing those as well. And so that started something that was a problem for a little while until I corrected my lower back rounding at the bottom of the squat. Fast forward to my early 30s when I decided I wanted to be a power lifter, and I was gaining a lot of weight. I went from probably 170 to 210 in the course of a year or two, and that's a lot of weight gain. And I had low back pain from just that weight gain as well, and so that was something that eventually came around as my body kind of adapted to that weight, and I got rid of kind of excess fat and continued to develop a little bit more muscle and got a little bit more solid at that weight, that low back pain did subside, but it was a problem at first from some of that quick weight gain. When I was doing powerlifting, then I developed some hamstring and hip issues from probably a combination of just training too hard too fast, and maybe not doing some of the things that I needed to do. And I have hip issues, fairly common to then develop low back pain and sometimes knee pain as well. So that was kind of the start of it. And then in my late 30s, when I was doing a lot of heavy work, I had a couple pretty bad deadlift and squat issues that left me in low back pain that made it difficult to squat. And really there was a time of about 2 years where low back hurt every time I squatted. And so for the most part I didn't really squat much, and when I did it wasn't particularly heavy. Often it was just with kettlebells. Sometimes I would do overhead squats. Other times I might do goblet squats or kettlebell front squats. Front squats, those barbell front squats would be the things that I would focus on. Dave Draper's top squat was another thing I tried. I tried a bunch of different things to try to work around that pain, and then for the most part I was able to find ways of squatting that didn't hurt the back as much. But again, there was a period of about 2 years that really I couldn't do a whole lot in the way of squatting. It was difficult, and I visited, of course, with chiropractor and my family doctor. Chiropractor couldn't find anything terribly out of place, but the adjustments he gave me helped. Also, my family doctor prescribed anti-inflammatories and muscle relaxants, and those helped, but nothing was a long-term solution. So I started looking for other resources. Some of the resources that I found were through Laurie Draper and her company, On Target Publications. They had several resources. One was a video by Lorimer Moseley, who's a pain researcher, and he really opened my eyes to pain and how complex pain really is. Eric Beard had an audio file that I bought through On Target Publication. That was also very enlightening. He talked a lot about long-term cases of low back pain among people who had acute injuries, but then after those injuries had healed, the pain persisted. And that kind of really described what I was experiencing as well. And Lorimer Moseley's pain video talked about similar things where the injury may be gone, but the pain persists. There are pain triggers, which is your body's way of communicating to you that, hey, you need to be careful. And those were all very eye-opening for me when it came to pain and how my body was trying to tell me something through that pain. It wasn't all in my mind. It wasn't necessarily an injury that I was re-injuring even. It was just the body's way of communicating, look, you need to be careful. Also, I looked at Ray Cook and Brett Jones, their work. At the time I was doing a lot of kettlebells, trying to find ways to train around my back issues. And I was doing a lot of kettlebell work, certified through the RKC. And so I looked at Ray Cook and Brett Jones' stuff, and that was also very helpful. One of the things that they said in their hip video, I recall, this was probably around 2010, one of the things that they said in their video was the hip is a bad neighbor. And what that means is when the hip is not functioning properly, it shifts the burden to other areas like your knees or your low back. And that was very insightful to me, and it was something, of course, I knew, but I hadn't really been able to express that if your hips are not functioning properly, well, your lower back and knees are going to take the brunt. And that was certainly part of what I was experiencing, and that's why I kept kind of having issues with the low back and why I was having issues with the hamstrings. Knock on wood, I haven't had too much in the way of knee issues at all in my life, but I need to be careful of the hips. So I also looked at Stuart McGill's stuff as well. One of the things that I found to be kind of helpful, or I think this was maybe quoted by Pavel, was the idea that low back endurance or hip endurance was associated, and strength of the core, endurance of the core was associated with keeping away lower back pain versus straight strength. So that was also kind of helpful to me to know that, well, if I work on kind of endurance rather than just trust that heavy lifting is going to strengthen my core enough that I don't have to worry about it, that was actually kind of helpful. And I did a lot of work with the glute ham bench. I bought a glute ham bench, and eventually I bought a 45-degree hyperextension. And those are two exercises that I do on a regular basis all the time, and I always do them pretty high rep. I don't load them up. I just try to do a lot of reps, and I have found that that has helped me a lot with my hips and my lower back. There were other things that I found to be very helpful. Learning how to hinge properly without back flexion was not easy, and it took me a while. For example, when I was doing kettlebell swings and when I was first starting, they looked very squat-like, and part of that is a build issue, I think. I have a build that's kind of suited to squat, so no matter what, my swings and my kettlebell work a lot of times are going to look very squatty. But there was a hinge component that I was just kind of missing. I wasn't loading the hips and the hamstrings as much as I could, and the lower back was taking the brunt of that. So learning how to hinge properly was a big one. Doing things like Dimmel deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, kettlebell swings, if you can learn how to do those well. All of those helped with learning how to hinge. Excuse me. Also, making sure that the hip flexors were flexible and strong was a big one. Hip flexor, hamstring, IT band stretches and the like all seem to help me alleviate some of that pain. Electrostim, I had a TENS unit that I was using on a fairly regular basis. As far as pain control, that was a pretty helpful thing for me as well. I did find that heat rubs helped. Analgesics like atomic balm, kind of a tiger balm type of thing, that was something that helped me as well. There were certain cues with squats that I found to be helpful. For me, keeping the chest out, there's an old BFS cue for squatting, spread the chest. That was something that seemed to help me a lot. Head position, I know that in starting strength, the cue is typically to look 45 degrees out. I never found that one to be a great cue for me, especially when I'm trying to maintain good posture, but spread the chest was a good one. I think some people call it packing the neck, just kind of moving the head back seemed to be helpful for me rather than allowing it to droop forward. Actually pushing the neck kind of in a little bit and what they call packing the neck seemed to be something that worked for me. I didn't say pack the neck, I just head back was what I used. Not head up, but head back. That seemed to help me as well. Reducing weight, lowering intensity while training was a big one. I mentioned body weight earlier. That was a big one too. lowering body weight, losing about 10 pounds made a big difference as far as how my lower back felt on a day-to-day basis. When you're carrying around 10, 20, 30 extra pounds, your back's going to take a beating. And so losing a solid 10 pounds was part of my lower back. I would do overhead squats on occasion as well. It is an exercise that I think would really punish you if you didn't do it right and if you didn't have a good upright position. So overhead squats were something that I did quite a bit while I was recovering. Finding a way to squat to keep the movement in the training was big for me. One thing I also noticed was if you don't do a lot of abdominal work, and I don't, quite frankly, I just don't do a lot of abdominal work, straight abdominal work. If you don't do that in your training, it is something you probably need to add. Do you need to do a lot of it? Maybe not. If you're doing enough heavy deadlifts and squats, you're probably working enough of your abdominals, especially if you're doing high reps. However, things like push-ups and things like pull-ups really work your abs. And if you do a lot of those, you're gonna find your abs get stronger. One thing that I found as I was having some of those issues was I was not doing as many pull-ups and push-ups as I had been in my teens and 20s. Those were exercises, pull-ups and push-ups, were exercises I did all the time growing up, and they were exercises I did all the time as a young athlete. But then when I was in my mid-late 20s and lifting occasionally, and that was all I did, I didn't do much in the way of pull-ups and push-ups. In my late 30s, when I realized that my abs were weak, adding those back into the mix made a huge difference in how my core stabilized. So if you don't have ab work in your training rotation, straight ab work, I would highly recommend that you make sure it's in there, and then don't neglect those pull-ups and push-ups. Other things. This is a big one. If you are finding yourself in a chair a lot, I would highly recommend things like hip flexor, hamstring, straddle stretches. Downward dog is a huge one. In fact, if there's one stretch that I think is huge, I would say that the downward dog is a big one. Also look up tactical frog. If you have hip issues, it's a great one for making sure that the hip is mobile and supple. It's just going to work everything that you need there. So tactical frog, straddle stretches, downward dog, IT band stretches I think are a good one, hip circles. All of those are things that you should look into doing. And with that, I think we're good. If you have any questions about low back pain, if you want to share experiences, if there's anything that I didn't cover, definitely let me know. But I think we've covered most of the things that I wanted to discuss. If you want to talk, for example, about medications and things like that, I can't really give you a whole lot of advice in that area necessarily, but I can tell you my experiences. All right. Well, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you on the next Squat Talks.